Previously on
Everything you'll ever need to know about an ROTC FTX.
The ultimate purpose of an FTX is to prepare you for Cadet Summer Training, your MS3 year. And above that, to become the best officer you can be. So we had our patrol base set up. First though, we ended up getting into our leadership positions. So with U of M joining us, we were now a full platoon size of about 48 MS1s through MS3s. Our FTX always starts out with land navigation. Pull out my sleeping bag. I just got into my sleeping bag when all of a sudden, bang, bang, bang. And to the right of me were shots fired as the enemy approached. Howdy and welcome to part 2 of the complete FTX breakdown. Because here in ROTC, leadership and excellence are two fundamental principles that FTX is going to forge out of the fire in you. So in this video, we're going to be covering 3 major topics over my Saturday and Sunday of FTX. If you haven't watched part 1, go watch that now. Leave, see ya, sayonara. But if you've already seen it, then get ready for part 2, because we're going to be covering STX Lanes, the bread and butter of ROTC, the maker or breaker of how you perform at CST, the simulated training environment lanes, which there were 4 of them at my FTX, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details of them. 2, the end state giant platoon perimeter defense, where we ended up expending all of our ammo in this massive event. Exciting, I'll tell you about it later. And finally, part 3, Sunday morning, what is necessary but never enjoyable, the cleaning of weapons. Blanks make an absolute mess. And so here we are cleaning our weapons, cleaning up ammo in our training environment at Limestone Hills, and finally packing up and heading out, resting, getting some sleep, and ending FTX. So I hope you're ready. Here we go. 0600, Saturday morning, about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, shivering cold in our patrol base. We get the command to pick up and head back to the TOC, our command central site of where we get sent out to do our operations. So we all pack up, head out, and once we're back at the TOC, we end up setting down our rucksacks in dress right dress in our squad formation. And then once we did that, we took our assault pack, we got our flick, and we then headed out to our central lane position. And we didn't have a name for this, so I'll just call it the lane base operations. And so at that lane base of operations, we ended up breaking up into the 4 squad groups, and we each ended up going north, south, east, west to our respective STX lane. So the 4 STX lanes, in order of how I connected them, was 1, the ambush, 2, a movement to contact, 3, an attack, and 4, another movement to contact. There are other lanes that are important and can be graded at CST for, but for our purposes in this fall squad operations, there were 4 lanes. And I think the other distinguishing factor is that at CST, you are going to have 3 different lanes. I think they call them something like Grizzly, Panther, and something else. But out of those 3 lanes, you start out slow with squad-based operations, and then move slowly into platoon-based operations, which is where you can actually execute most missions, like an ambush. You don't really conduct an ambush at a squad size, but for our purposes, we do, for the training. And so we, in fall FTX, are only doing squad-based operations. So all 4 of those lanes were squad-based. Our squad of 11 or 12 people, broken up into 2 heavy teams of 5 or 6 each. So that kind of gives you the composition of how we operated, and I was, again, squad leader for my lane. So we got to the central lane base of operations. We got our ammo for the day, so we loaded up our magazines, got our 3 magazines, and we ended up heading off into our T Alpha Alpha. So the T Alpha Alpha is the tactical assembly area. It's where me as squad leader is going to be receiving the operations order, the op ord, from the MS4, and Cadre is there to judge me with their blue card. So I had 2 graders, both the MS4 and Cadre member. And once I got my op ord, I then had the mission start then and there. So from there on, a fire was lit under me. I have a certain timeline that I have to meet. I had a no later than time, which I think was 09:45, to have the ambush completely executed and done with. So I had to back plan from that op board to do everything else. And in this next segment, I'm going to be discussing everything that was going through my mind during that ambush lane. How did I execute this ambush? I followed the 8 TLPs, the troop leading procedures. So the acronym that I like always saying is RIM ICCIS, and it starts with receiving the mission. So that's what I discussed. I received the op board from the MS4, and I used the op board shell right here that I bought on Amazon, and I have the link in the description. It has proven extremely beneficial. It has all things outlined. So an op board is 5 paragraphs, including situation, and then of course you have your mission statement right here. It gives you other advice on how to, what the terms mean, how to write them out. Then you have your execution, which is the largest of the op board. That's where you actually have your individual phases of operation, your actual plans for how you're going to execute the mission. Then you have your sustainment on this back page here. And then last but not least, if it's present here, schema maneuver, movement plan, and then there we go. Sustainment right here. You have under that your logistics, your general transportation, the EPW, aid and litter stuff, and then lastly, command and signal. So that's where we have our pace, communication methods, and other radio signals. So you fill out what is necessary. You are again under stressful, fast-paced scenarios. So of course you're not going to fill out this completely. You're just going to really summarize what's the most important information, especially that mission statement. There's a reason that the MS4 is reading it to you. It's supposed to say it twice because that is what is the backbone of your entire operation. And my mission statement was to conduct an ambush on this place, on this day. It's the who, what, when, where, why. So it gives you the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why on the ambush. So from there, I ended up doing my 1/3, 2/3 planning of the TLPs. So after receiving the mission, I'm supposed to issue the warning order, or the warno. And so I get my team leaders, draw them in. I say, hey, this is what we're going to prepare for. We're preparing for an ambush. Go tell your team members. They go and tell their team members. And then I'm making a tentative plan. So that's step 3 of the troop leading procedures. And so this is all happening at a rapid pace in my head. Within like 3 minutes of receiving the op board, I'm supposed to be giving out that warning order and making the tentative plan. And then I delegated to one of my team leaders to help build the terrain model. So the other thing that I highly suggest doing before your MS3 year is getting a terrain model kit, a TMK. And my MS2 year, ended up building one. We ended up using these metal kind of backings and then had magnetic strips and printouts of the terrain model kit pieces. So like here's our tactical alpha. And then here we have our objective. And so these are all useful for the terrain model. And as you can see, I still have a lot of limestone hills in it with me. And we have kind of a nice azimuth distance direction for the pace plan, because often you're going to have an MS1 in the alpha team be your compass and pace. And so having a terrain model kit like this, there's some that you can attach to your flick that are enclosed. Those are also really nice. But something like that is going to just save you a lot of hassle and difficulty with explaining your plan to your subordinates. So a good terrain model is going to communicate. It's a great rehearsal method. So with that, I was then delegating that out. I was having them run rehearsals. Here I am trying to map out my timeline. So I'm like, okay, I have to have this no later than 09:45. The time is currently something like 7:30. I have this much time to move from my tactical alpha to my ORP, so the objective rally point. So usually the mission is divided into 3 phases: your tactical alpha, your ORP, and then on the objective. And so from the tactical alpha, I had to tell my captain, who kept on questioning me. It was like, what is your thought here? Why do you want to do this here? When are you leaving? So they're trying to stress you out. They're trying to work you up. You have to keep cool and collected and delegate. And so from the tactical alpha, I'm like, okay, we are stepping off no later than this time, so something like 15 minutes later, to our ORP. The compass and pace plan was set. I had my alpha team leader be delegated with that responsibility. We step off. Me as squad leader, I'm kind of between my 2 teams, helping guide the squad leaders. We then walk towards our ORP that I've established on the map that is something like 100 to 200 meters away from the ambush spot. So I have them sent out to that spot. We pause. If we come across an LDA, a linear danger area, or an ODA, an open danger area, we're supposed to proceed accordingly. So there's an SOP, the standard operating procedures, that your squad or your platoon is going to make up, and that's what everyone should be informed about, because that is also the backbone of your operations. Your SOP is how you're going to operate your EPW teams, your aid and litter teams, your hand and arm signals. Is an LDA like this, like we usually do, kind of diagonal, or is it something different? And so that's all established in the SOP. What is not SOP is right here, the Ranger Handbook. And so the Ranger Handbook is a set of guidelines that really just help you operate and function military-wise. And so it has a ton of great advice. If you don't have a Ranger Handbook, I highly suggest getting one as soon as possible. But some people like me have a struggle thinking outside of the Ranger Handbook. So they're often like, we should not give you a Ranger Handbook because you're just going to try to answer everything from the book. And so I'm a very by-the-book type of person. But if you like having that kind of SOP routine and knowing what you can do and what you're supposed to follow, read your Ranger Handbook. It's going to help you tremendously. And so that is one of the issuable items that you should be given in ROTC. But once I had us move from the T alpha alpha to the ORP, we then tactically halted. We established our ORP, secured the area. And then from there, I sent a leader's recon out to the objective. So we set our next pace and azimuth out. We walked at about 200 meters out to our objective point, came across this road. And funny enough, on the map, I did not see this little unpaved, unfinished road. So I thought that we had to walk up closer to the finished road. That was about 100 meters further. But fortunately, the MS4 stopped me and he says, no, I think your pace and compass is right. You might have missed that road back there. And so the little trail we came across, turns out that that was actually our objective site. So I ended up having to backtrack us back to that little dirt unfinished path that we passed, and that was going to be the objective point. So on there, you have different parts of an ambush. So there's 3 main elements of an ambush. If you want to see this right here, I have them written down. You can take a picture of that if you want. But you have 3 elements: your security element, your support element, and your assault element. At a squad level, it's tough. Your security element is going to be 2 cadets, and your support is 1 team, which is going to be smaller, and your assault is another team. And so for me, support is usually alpha team, assault is usually bravo team. Support for like a movement to contact is usually the first one to initiate contact with the enemy, while your assault team is always going to be the one making the flanking maneuver and then piling through the enemy. So that's there. And then the security elements for an ambush are supposed to establish your left and right limits for the kill zone. So the kill zone is where you want to initiate the ambush. So I had all these thoughts going through my mind when we were doing our leader's recon, while others were back at the ORP. And I'm like, okay, so here's the road bend. Is this going to be a linear ambush or an L-shaped ambush? There's an L shape in the road, so you know what? I'll do an L-shaped ambush. So usually that works where you put your most casualty producing weapon, which in my case was the M240, where the enemy is going to be walking straight into it. So I wanted to have the M240 right in between the kill zone so they could make their left and right kind of sway here. And if it was a linear ambush, you can often just put your 240 on the linear feature kind of covered, and then they can just fire straight down that road and they can take out everyone. So because mine was an L-shaped, I had the 240 kind of in between the kill zone. I had my assault team up on a hill where they could get protection and cover, and then I had my security elements in this kind of confined space. I'll put up a picture right here of what you're supposed to have spacing wise between your squad members. But for my case, because the L-shaped was so confined and there was no cover and concealment on the top of this little hill, I had to make kind of a modified narrowing ambush. And so these are all the critical things me as squad leader and you as a future leader will have to make on the fly. How I had to say, okay, the Ranger handbook says this, but we can't do that in this MTC condition. So these mission variables that you're all going to encounter, you have to be able to think and justify why you did something, because that's what cadre are looking for. They're wanting that critical thinking skill. So I had to modify that. And then I had my M240 initiate fire because we also had a claymore issued to us, but we could not use it because there was no big tree where my support element was that it could end up being secured for, and we wouldn't have the backblast, which is 16 meters, which would end up taking out our own guys. And as I've learned time and time again from past FTXs, a 3 often has a claymore placed really close to their support element, and then their support element gets killed off when cadre says, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. They're like, why? Well, you were within 16 meters of that backblast of the claymore. The claymore was not secured in front of a tree or something. So I ended up making the quick decision that I'm like, oh great, you want to use your claymore to do well, but I don't think we can actually initiate a claymore in this location. So I said, no claymore, M240, you're initiating fire. I will give you the command when you are good to go. So he said yes. We also have a whistle. I have a whistle on my flick, and when the assault element starts blasting through, I use that whistle. 1 whistle, 2 whistle, 3 whistles to 1. Shift fire, lift fire, cease fire. So we have SOP protocols for when the assault team can pick up for the shift fire and then actually start moving through for the lift fire and then completely blast through the objective when cease fire, so the support element stops firing. So these are also things that you want to do to prevent fratricide. And that was the one ding on my lane that I actually had a successful ambush. The Op 4 got killed, my guys were in good communication, we had good lace reports, no one got killed except one. And the one of my guys that got killed, cadre said, you had fratricide. Your assault element hit your farthest most security element guy. And I was like, you are kidding me. So communication is key with saying, hey, assault team leader, my security elements are placed here. Do not fire within those, or outside those security elements. And if you're firing inside, then you're gonna have fratricide on your hands. So really just communicating that well with your assault team leader is vital. And so as I learned, I did not communicate that clearly enough. And knowing that there's MS1s who've never fired an M4 before and this is their first lane, that's also challenging. You have to tell them, okay, here's your sector, I need you to just pretend to shoot in here. And when they're shooting blanks. So there's just a lot of steps and variables and factors to think about, and that is what makes this so challenging but so enriching. Your leadership and your excellence are going to absolutely skyrocket after these STX lanes. And here we were thrown in the fire as MS3s. Just last year we're MS2s and we were still pulling security and not really knowing what the planning stage was looking like. And here just, 6 months later than our spring FTX, here we are completely thrown into the pot of just saying, okay, we are now leaders. We have to conduct this ambush. We have this timeline to follow. We need to be moving. You have to delegate this, delegate that. Assault element, don't shoot my support team. Support team, fire in this zone. The enemy is here. Oh no, the enemy's reacting like this. What are you gonna do? Do you have SOPs set up for that? What's your MOA, the MCA, most dangerous course of action, the MDC, and then most likely course of action. And then, so what are those looking like for your enemy? How are you going to synthesize your op board and then tell it back to your squad members and brief it out to the rest of your squad? Just everything that goes through your mind on an ambush. And I like to associate it, which if you play sports, to that feeling you get right before your game begins, that anxiety or just that tense nervousness of like, ooh, how am I gonna perform? How's this game gonna go? It feels just like that, except it's really just prolonged over the entire STX lane. And by the end of it, your energy just feels drawn away. You feel absolutely just exhausted by having that heightened sense of just focus, determination, stressors thrown at you, mission variables thrown at you, that it really does feel like you're playing in the middle of a sport while you're running these lanes. And so that's where sports, I think, are extremely beneficial to helping you know how to navigate, know how to handle the pressure, know how to perform well under stress. And so that was the ambush lane. Once the ambush lane was complete, we ended up doing a hot wash, which is like an after action review, the AAR, but it's informal, it's not very formal. So the hot wash just goes, what was supposed to happen? Did it happen? What was going on team leaders? What was going on squad leader? And so we have to answer cadres questions, we have to answer the MS4's questions. How we answer and what people say really helps guide how they grade you. And this is a good time to plug in, what does grading look like in ROTC? And so blue cards are what you are getting graded on, which is over the PLACID acronym. It's like presence, leads, achieves, competencies. So I think it's the character aspect, intellect, and develops. So you have 6 of the ALRM model that they're grading you off of, and they have to grade you based off each of those. And so with the blue card, there's 4 different grades. So you have your E, which you excelled, you're excellent. P, you're proficient. C, you're competent. And U, you're untrained. And so we are graded on that scale of 4 based on the ALRM model. And I was very fortunate. I actually got a P on my ambush lane. Cadre member almost said he was going to give me a C, but because I was able to refer back to the Ranger Handbook, because I was able to give an answer to his questions, he said that I knew what I wanted to do, I just didn't have the experience to actually know how to execute it as well. So that fratricide was a perfect example of saying, you really messed up. Like, you got one of your guys killed, but you had the right idea in mind. And for Fall FTX, that's really the big idea, is can you take all this information and synthesize it into this digestible amount to then brief back to your people to execute the mission. And it was a great experience in that. But once the hot wash was over, we ended up having a leadership change. So I was now a team leader, and my Bravo team leader was put into the squad leader position, and then he re-ran the lane. So rather than going back to the ORP and then T alpha alpha, we just started back at the ORP. He had his own shortened plan, so rather than me with my hour and a half to plan, he had something like 45 minutes. So he conducted the ambush how he wanted, and his was different. He had, I believe, a linear ambush versus I did an L-shaped, and it worked pretty well. So he took what I made a mistake on, he fixed it, he tweaked it, and we had a pretty smooth ambush on that. So he ran that through. So that was our ambush lane, which we ran through twice. Once we were done with the ambush lane, we picked up, we moved back to our lane base of operations where we met with the other squads who came back from their lane, and then we set off to our movement to contact lane. There's a pretty clear reason why the movement to contact lane was twice for our STX lanes, because it is just so vital to being able to execute a good movement to contact. It's the most kind of sporadic, spontaneous, because you can run into the enemy at any moment. You have to be expecting them at any moment. You have to know exactly how to respond at any moment. You have to be able to do so many things at so many levels, all correctly on a movement to contact. Versus an attack, you get to hopefully recon out the enemy, you get to position people just perfectly, you get to have everything work for you, similar to the ambush, similar to a perimeter defense where you're kind of just sitting there waiting. And so the movement to contact is probably the most variable. And it is in the Ranger Handbook. Unlike an ambush, because there's no such thing as a squad ambush, there is a movement to contact in the Ranger Handbook. It is 7-25, as I've written down here. And the movement to contact is treated tactically the entire time. So we are moving in a squad formation in the wedge. So we call wedge, we wedge up, and he ended up having us do bounding overwatch successive. So again, it was a leadership change. I'm no longer squad leader. Someone else in the MS3s took over that position. There was 4 of us for the 4 lanes, so we each got 1 blue card on each lane. So he led us out in the bounding overwatch successive movement, and originally we were bounding very poorly. We were kind of walking tactically, but we were still just walking kind of through the forest. And in an environment where the enemy could pop out at any moment, that's not what bounding is supposed to be. We're supposed to be doing somewhat like longer 3-5 second buddy rushes in your squad. So for bounding overwatch successive, as we're moving towards the objective, we're supposed to like be very quick, up, 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 they see me, I'm down. And then for successive, that means that then Bravo team or whoever it is now goes like up, up, up. They see me, I'm down. So now we're here with our 2 teams, and then the squad leader is somewhere here. And then because it's successive, they don't alternate, it's successive, so alpha team continues. So it's like up, 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 they see me, I'm down. So they stop. Up, 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 they see me, I'm down. So then we're now moving towards the potential objective spot. And then what actually happened in our first movement to contact was that I spotted the enemy first. So he had on a black fleece cap in the distance, and I don't think he saw me. He walked behind a tree and was like, oh, one enemy. So like do the hand and arm signal towards squad leader. Squad leader says, okay, get down, we stop. Then we continued to bound until we started contact. So I started firing the 3Ds, distance, description, direction, start firing at the enemy. And then because my team ended up taking on contact first, that immediately forces the other team to become the assault element. So we become support, they become assault, and then they started flanking New York style from the right onto the objective, blast through the objective. Here we are just firing, and then we come upon the objective. So because of the variability that you don't have a set support and assault team, you both have to know who to be depending on who takes contact first. It introduces so many factors, and it makes it really fun, really thought-provoking, really critical to just know what you are doing well and know how to communicate without talking. It's a lot of hand and arm signals, a lot of, I hope the MS1 knows what I'm doing when I'm doing this with the enemy, but I don't know. They sound like they know what they're doing. So it's a lot of, unfortunately, assumption with that communication being well, but at the same time, the SOP is supposed to dictate what they know and what they don't know. So we conducted that movement to contact. It went pretty smoothly, actually. The assault element, a really good flanking maneuver. They really pushed through well. They used the terrain association really well, so they ended up going higher on this hill, and then they kind of went over it, so they had the high ground over the enemy. Really tactically sound move, where us in assault, we just got good cover and concealment, started laying fire on the enemy. So with that movement to contact, we actually did pretty well for it being our first one. And then we ended up running it again. So the second time, we moved back to our ORP, ran through it again. The second time wasn't quite as crisp, but we still kind of refined some things. So we went through the second movement to contact and then returned back to our base lane of operations. So that was our second lane of 4. The movement to contact. After the movement to contact, it was about noon, so back at the base lane of operations, we ended up getting an MRE, we got to eat, we got to reload ammo, so fortunately we got more M4 ammo because originally we were running pretty low, and somehow we got way too much 7.62 ammo, and our M240 kept on jamming, which was a terrible thing. There's this thing called a discriminator, which you can kind of makeshift out of cardboard and kind of just stick it up above the bolt. So then it doesn't jam when the bolt ends up running back, and for some reason it like gets caught up. So having that discriminator up top helps keep it sliding properly. So we learned that with the M240 and just some other things to help prevent it from jamming as much. We just had so much leftover 7.62 ammo because we couldn't fire our M240. But the M4s were low on ammo. So we loaded that, got new magazines, got some food in our systems, and this was where it became a lot more mentally challenging. Here we are coming off 2 hours and 15 minutes of sleep the night before because of the defense and the attack in our patrol base. Here I am coming off being the first squad leader in the morning, being the guinea pig on lanes, coming off a movement to contact with a ton of moving parts, and here we are having 2 more lanes for the day and just being physically exhausted already. It's starting to get a little warmer. The weather for this FTX is actually pretty decent other than the nights. It got into kind of mid 40s. I don't think got low 50, but kind of mid 40s for the highs on the day. And so we were feeling pretty comfortable. You can get pretty lethargic pretty quickly, and so we just had to keep that energy going forward. And our next lane was an attack. So I think I was Bravo team leader for the attack lane. Someone else was squad leader. He ends up getting out to the T Alpha Alpha. He gets issued the op order. And so it's the same thing like for my ambush. He gets issued the op order. I am here with my team telling them what's going on once he briefs me. I was instructed to help him build the terrain model, so I used my terrain model kit to help out there. I then briefed my team on what the terrain model looks like while he's delegating that other responsibility. I was having my people run rehearsals. What does EPW look like? What does aid and litter look like on the attack? where to kind of set up the 240 the best. Is it still jamming? What's going on? So we're getting all these pieces together. And for the attack, we were on top of this ridgeline and the enemy was on the other side. So once we moved away from our tactical alpha, walked up this ridgeline and got up top for our ORP, we ended up moving off to do a leader's recon, and immediately upon cresting the hill, we silhouetted ourselves and we saw the enemy down below and they saw us and we're like, oh no. And so we froze. And at this point, it was so funny because the squad leader turns to us team leaders and he goes, are you guys thinking what I'm thinking? And I'm like, diversion. And so we all came to a consensus that it'd be really cool, really risky, but really cool if we could execute a diversion element and then have a larger assault element completely blast through the enemy while they're engaged with this small diversion. So I ended up being chosen as the diversion, or not the diversion element team leader. I was the assaulting team leader and he was with the diversion element. So they ended up cresting the hill once we got our frag order. So the fragmentary order, which completely changed our plan of operations. So he ended up changing that where we had a little diversion element come over and then he called for smoke and a grenade. So we also had like 10 rounds of HE per 10, so high explosives and something amount of smoke. And so he could do a call for fire on the enemy since we knew where they were. So he said my initiating call was when we heard the bang go off on the play grenade. So we had these fake grenades go off. And then I was assaulting through, trying to keep my team completely hidden in the low-lying trees. And then they were diverting on the enemy. And once the diversion element was set in place and the grenade was thrown, my assaulting element was pretty far back still. So we had to really run up, and apparently the enemy had seen one of my guys in the assaulting element through this break in the trees. The assaulting element would have been completely hidden if not for that one cadet. And so we were so close to running a pretty smooth execution of a diversion tactic. And so we came across the enemy, blasted through them. Of course, the diversion element ended up shifting, lifting, ceasing fire so we could blast through. We got on the other side, we called LOA, LOA, and so LOA is your limit of advance when you blast through the objective. Once you blast through, you get 360 security, then you send out your special teams. So I think for the assaulting element, mine was EPW. So EPW gets up, they quickly secure to make sure that all the enemies are dead checked. They do their proper tactics to lift them up, check if there's a grenade under them, yell out clear if there's not, throw them back down, check for CCIR and PIR, which are basically like critical commanders information, and you end up doing the complete pat downs of the enemy, making sure they don't have anything on them. Our enemy did, so they had this, I think, like German paper, which was supposed to give coordinates and their next plans or something. So we were supposed to give that to our squad leader, and then the squad leader is supposed to radio up to command saying, okay, hey you, this is me. We have 3 casualties of Op 4. We have taken 1 casualty of friendlies. We have 1 piece of CCIR, which is this paper here. We are planning to return to our ORP. And then you say, like, is that the best next course of action? So once we do that, command would then say, which in this case is just a cadre member, like, approved, you can return to your ORP, or no, prepare for follow-on operations. So our follow-on operation was actually just to continue the perimeter defense. So we got that follow-on operation. So once EPW went through and I got to lead that, we ended up saying, okay, EPW is checked. You cross the enemy's arms and feet, you can put their PC over, they're all checked. Now Aid and Litter can come in and do their thing. So Aid and Litter comes in and checks for the wounded, applies tourniquets, applies that. We all just do play world, so we didn't actually do that here. And once that was all done, we then call out lace reports, so like liquids, ammo, casualties, and then other equipment checks. So make sure everyone has everything, they have enough water, they have their ammo, do those accountability tasks. So as team leader, I'm in charge of that. I'm in charge of keeping my team accountable, making sure they're doing their tasks, making sure they know what's going on, what's happening. So that was the attack lane. And for the second half of the 4 lanes, so this attack lane and the next movement to contact, we stopped doing the 2 lanes where we reran it with someone else on a shorter timeline. We just did 1. So we did 1 long attack. And so that was at least, I think, 2 hours probably from beginning to end, 2 hours, 15 minutes, where we just did that entire attack, moved back to our control base lane of operations, and prepared for our final STX lane. Okay, so the final STX lane, the final movement to contact. There was a very, very interesting twist to how this was going to operate. So we got back to our base lane of operations. We're waiting on our final command. We move out to the T Alpha Alpha. Here I am as a team leader. We don't really know our leadership roles yet. So we move out. We knew that there's just one final MS3 who's not been squad leader. So he was like, yeah, I'm it. So they're like, yep, you're it. And then he said, but do you guys know who's team leader? And so Cadre asked that question. They said, who's team leader? And we're all like, I don't know. And so Alpha Bravo team leaders, there's no one. He's like, nope. And so we get out to our T Alpha Alpha, the tactical assembly area, completely unaware of what the leadership is for this lane because we just have a squad leader and no team leaders. And then he pulls out saying, hey, you, MS1, you both are now team leaders. And so the cadre member ended up choosing 2 MS1s who their whole STX Lanes experience is comprised of the 3 ones we did earlier. And they're now leading the team. And so I was just the average Joe, just like a private, where this MS1 is now in that team leader position. And so we had MS1s lead us through our last movement to contact as a test to see how well the squad leader could really relay information and communication to them, and then how well the MS1s could then step into our shoes of how hard it is being an MS3 in those leadership roles. And so they got a first-hand experience, which I was impressed because when I was an MS1, I do not think I could do nearly what they were doing. Because you're literally just pulling security while all the planning is going around you as an MS1, and you don't know what that planning is. You're being told information that you are like, okay, I know it's an ambush, I know it's a movement of contact. Do I know what else? Oh, I'm support team, or I'm support element. I guess I know what that means. I kind of stay put and fire at the enemy while assault is gonna flank through. But besides that, you as an MS1 just don't know. And the squad leader ended up, to his credit, doing a great job really just explaining things in their most basic units to say, okay, this movement to contact's here, help me build a train model, help brief this out to your team members, this is the timeline, here's where our ORP is going to be, and then we're going to move on to the objective from there. So just like the normal steps of the last ones from the T Alpha Alpha, we moved to the ORP, we then started moving in this bounding overwatch movement out to the enemy. I ended up being the element which didn't take contact first, so I was in the support element this time. We flanked New York from the right, blasted through the enemy. The MS1s somewhat struggled with how that flanking maneuver was going to work out, but we were helping them with kind of guiding that, staying online, keeping good spacing, knowing the whistle commands for when to pick up, when to blast through, when to wait. Like, hey, we could take fratricide if you don't wait. So all these steps of trying to get the MS1s to help out there. And then we blasted through the objective, and then we hit LOA. We got 360 security. We did our EPW teams, our aid and litter teams, radioed up to higher, that was squad leader's role, and then we were done with our 4th lane. And it was such a long Saturday when you think of that, from 0600 to about 1800. So it's 12 hours straight of STX lanes with those little breaks for eating and ammo refilling and that in between. So it's 12 hours of you feeling like you're in a sports game. You're feeling that heightened sense of, okay, I need to be on my A game. I need to be analyzing everything. I need to be under those stressors. I need to be able to perform well despite those stressors. I need to communicate. I need to think on the fly. I need to make fragmentary orders if things change. I need to just be on top of it. And so that was 12 hours straight. And by the end of it, you are just so exhausted. So we finished our STX lanes. We got back to the main base of operations, and then we headed out back to the top for the final event of Saturday night. There's a rule in ROTC that you have to expend all ammo that you are given. The guard, where we get our ammo from, doesn't want it back, or else we're not getting as much in the future or something like that. So cadre say, you have to expend all your ammo. And so here we are sitting with way too much 7.62 ammo because our M240 kept on jamming, and a lot of M4 ammo that didn't get used. So what do? Usually, what's called a SPENDEX, where we all just stand on line and then we fire off and try to knock at their BFA tips, which is kind of this screw on top on the end of our barrel, to melt. Because there's been some issues with the M240, you don't do your 3-5 second trigger squeezes and you just try to do auto, and it's going to heat up so much that the BFA can literally melt to the barrel, where we've had to have it sawed off. big problem. And so that's what the SPENDEX is. We're usually just spend all of our ammo, so spend expenditure pretty much. And this time though, Cadre asked the good question, what's the training value of standing in line and shooting the rest of your ammo? And the fours were like, nothing really, just you're firing it. So he said, you know what we can do? We can do a giant perimeter defense. And so that's what we did. We all moved back to the talk, so that bivouac site at the beginning that I mentioned. And once there, we broke up into our 4 squads. So again, I was first squad. We broke off into the back, while another squad took off one side, the other squad took off one, and on. We made a giant circle around the talk site, and we positioned ourselves, and we had all of our ammo ready, and we were given the command, shoot everything, just expend all ammo. So we had this massive waiting event where we're just waiting for the enemy to appear. And so the MS4s come back, they start firing on the opposite end of the circle. So say we were the 6 o'clock, they were firing at the 12 o'clock. So we were just waiting there for the longest time with all of our ammo, like, okay, I hope the enemy comes sometime. And then the enemy started moving in a clockwise rotation around each squad, so then they could just fire at the enemy, yell out their kind of battle drills, have the leadership run into the center saying where they're taking fire. So it's kind of like that first night patrol base where you're facing the attack, you're trying to treat that properly, you're giving challenges and passwords to people who are entering and leaving to make sure they're friendlies, and just doing all those steps that you have to. And with that, the enemy finally came across my end of the circle. I think we were actually last, and we ended up expending all of our ammo with that. That was fun, and at the end you're just so exhausted. You're like, okay, I just want to get this over with. Bang, 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 bang. Like one enemy, 50 meters, black BDUs, bang, 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 bang. And so we just expend all of our ammo. I have to walk through all the team members and squad members at large and say, okay, have you used all your ammo? Have you used all your ammo? Have you used all your ammo? And everyone said yes, except the M240s. So the M240s just had way too much ammo, and it was nice that the MS4 said that they were going to help expend the rest of it. So the MS4s had some fun getting to shoot off the M240s when they weren't jammed. And we ended up doing a weapons turn-in. So I passed my squad leader test of having all my equipment accounted for. I got to get signed off on my hand receipt, so we turned back all our equipment back in correctly. No one lost anything, which was a miracle after the kind of night land nav events of the other MS1s who did lose things. So I was very glad no magazines were lost. That's usually the first item someone loses. You're firing, you run out of ammo, you get your next magazine, you put it in, you just drop your magazine on accident or in the height of battle. And so they just drop their magazine, and then we have to form hands across America, get in long line, and just sweep through the lane until someone is like, oh, there's the magazine. And so that is something which cadre get very mad about often, how they're like, well, don't prepare a sleep tonight because we're going to be on a hunt for a magazine. So I was just very impressed with my squad, how they kept track of all their items. We turned everything back in, and we got ready for our last night at FTX in a patrol base. But this time, because we turned in our weapons, we knew we couldn't be attacked, or if we did get attacked, we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves. So it was a really nice, less tactical patrol base. We got in, we still went through the apexes, we did all that general operating procedures for forming a patrol base. But once that was happening, we got fire guard, which was only 15 minutes. And because we had the whole platoon do fire guard, we ended up just having buddy teams of 2 go for 15 minutes all through the night. And we got almost 8 hours of sleep. So from the first night, 2 hours of sleep, to the second night, 8 hours of sleep. Hey, balances out with 5 hours of sleep. I'm not complaining. So the second night, we ended up getting to sleep pretty early, and it was a lot warmer than the first night. We actually had the temperature increase through FTX, where usually it works the opposite way. So I got my sleeping bag, got asleep after holding fire guard first, and then got to sleep for that nice long time. Woke up, had my black fleece on, but I actually didn't feel too cold. I think that morning was about 40 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was really nice not having all this kind of ice all over your equipment and frost. So we woke up, we then got back into the talk for our final things to do before leaving. Some people were chosen to help clean the machine guns back at the aviation building, so they took off, while the rest of us, including me, ended up staying, and we had to walk the lanes. And so because this is a training environment that gets used by the guard and gets used pretty frequently, if we just left all of our ammo, spent cartridges everywhere, it would get pretty nasty pretty quick. So we end up doing all these walkthroughs where we clean up the lanes, and we ended up going to our last lane, so the last movement to contact. We conducted a thorough sweep, picked up the 7.62s, the brass, and then the 5.56 ammo, put them all in ammo cans, filled that up, cleaned all the area, and then returned back to the talk. And so once we were done with that, we cleaned up the talk because of our last perimeter defense where we fired all of our ammo as well. So we cleaned up that area at the end. Then we got back into our squad formation and we were pretty much done, except there was one last order. To close out FTX, you know the most fun thing that all of us have to do every time we shoot weapons? Clean them? Yeah. So what ended up being about 5 hours of M4 cleaning, helping teach the freshmen how to clean weapons, and then helping us just relearn what to look for, because the star chamber is, of course, one of the hardest places to reach and hardest places to clean, and what always gets your weapon rejected when you try to turn it in. And so what was really nice is this time we had a carbon breakdown tank, so I got to use that liquid, and it helped kind of break down the carbon buildup on the M4, so it's easier to scrape off and use towels and use different stuff to clean. My favorite cleaning equipment item is Q-tips. Q-tips do a really great job. Pipe cleaners are so-so, but the Q-tips do well. So I really like to just clean my weapon with them when possible, and then use the bore snake to just clean through the barrel. And once the 5 hours of cleaning M4s was done, we got to load in the vans and feel the sweet, sweet relief of being done with FTX. 55 hours from beginning to end over the course of 3 days, Friday through Sunday. And once it's over, there's very few things that feel quite as sweet as that. You're just completely exhausted, knowing you're gonna sleep super well that night. You are just ready to really just finish out your semester strong, knowing that you don't have another FTX till the following semester. And as an MS3, that was probably the most stressful FTX, because we go in knowing almost nothing and have to leave knowing everything. So perhaps the spring with platoon size operations will be just as stressful, if not more. But I think because of how little we knew going into FTX and then leaving with this newfound knowledge, it was extremely hard, extremely challenging, but we came out better for it. Say hello to the Ranger Handbook one last time, because I believe there's a TC in here that says to subscribe, and leave a comment for what you look forward to most at FTX. Now that you know what FTX is, you might not know all the equipment you have. And so for that, watch this video right here for a full gear layout. I'll catch you on the flip side. Ad Meliora, toward better things.